right, welcome to another episode of Covered with the Utah FOP. I'm your host, Bret Rawson, here with some of the usual suspects today. We've got Brent Jex, Kevin Murray, Spencer's in the house working the board, and there's that little guy in the corner.
The wee little man.
The wee little man that we like to call Travis. Trav, how you doing? I know you don't have a mic, but just say something so everybody knows that I'm not making this up. He's got a fistful of hankies. What are you doing, bro? What are you doing? What are you doing over there?
This is a family show.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that this is a family show.
Where's that button?
But I do have the button today. That button works. I have it ready. Not because I'm going to swear, because I don't do that anymore. But yeah, I'm surprised we've gotten 5 seconds into this and you haven't commented on my face.
I was just going to get to that.
Okay.
On your face? How about I comment on your face?
Yeah, I had a funeral.
If you're waiting for me to hit on you, I'm not going to do it. I'll let Travis do that, but I'm not.
I had a funeral for that beard, and it's not because Danny King, shamed me into it.
It's just coincidence.
Well, he did make fun of the fact that I was wearing corduroy and I looked like I slept under a bridge, but really it was when I stopped to tie my shoe at 31st and State and somebody gave me $1. That's when I thought, this is
but it was in pennies and you picked it all up.
Yeah, it was time for a change. It really was. But
makes you look younger.
There's a big void in this room without your beard.
Yeah,
and there was some other hair that was a little bit longer, probably when I was the last one here.
That's right, dude.
The world has lost some hair.
It has. Did you save yours in a bag, or did you send it to one of those charities, or what did you do?
It actually probably just ended up on my back. It just isn't. It's not going away.
It's amazing.
My wife can attest to that. She complains about it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was wondering what we're going to talk about today. I know there are important things going on in the world, but there was a quote, a very famous. What was the guy that quote?
Sir Butler, Lieutenant General Butler, or something. But I think he was quoting somebody else. But I can't pronounce it. And I can't.
That's fine. Give it your best shot. But there's a quote. You sent it to me this morning.
There was a guy. Who was not Sun Tzu.
Oh, okay.
But he was like a warrior battle.
Oh, Thucydides.
Scholar.
Yeah.
Thucydides, yeah.
Of course it is.
Common spelling.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead and tell us who that is.
I think he wrote extensively about the Peloponnesian War.
About the time that the Dutch and the Greek merged their armies.
Their empires.
Their empires.
Yeah. Quoted extensively by Clausewitz. Yeah, I got you.
So this one, and I've seen it a couple of different, phrased a couple of different ways, but the origin of it is the nation that will insist on drawing a broad line of demarcation between the fighting man and the thinking man is liable to find its fighting done by fools and its thinking done by cowards. And as we were talking, and I had a meeting with a police administrator, and they were talking about some of the things that they were doing in wellness and this and that, and it kind of struck me, and we were talking a little bit when we were down at the national board meeting in San Diego, that while wellness is very important and it's key, I kind of worry a little bit.
Yeah.
There was a. Do you remember?
What do you worry about? You worry. I mean, because wellness, we talk about it all the time on this show. We want people to be healthy. We want people to be whole, and this profession causes problems. We all know that.
It does.
Yeah, but what are you worried about there, Mr. Jex?
I worry that not so much the lack of wellness, but wellness itself, there might be a tendency to use it as a crutch.
Oh.
Kind of that there was a quote that I came across a couple of weeks ago that really kind of stood out, and it says, for the most part, it says that circumstance doesn't alleviate responsibility. And I thought about and I'm sure you can probably say date and time of when this happened, but do you remember when the
February
when
11th,
the military?
1963.
Well, it was more recent than that.
Okay.
When the military went to, for lack of a better term, the yellow card, that the cadets, if they're being, educated by a drill instructor, that they can
Oh, the
go,
recruits. You're talking.
hey, I need a timeout. You're yelling at me.
I can't remember which branch that was, but yeah.
Yeah.
My dad, who, I've mentioned on this show before, spent over 30 years in the Marine Corps, calls it the rampant occasion of Marines.
Well played.
Yeah.
Well played.
So, I love this button, by the way.
Yeah,
it's dangerous.
It was a great find.
Yeah.
Great find. Good job, Spencer.
I think you know what I'm referring to, and so your concern, if I hear you correctly, your concern is that even though we talk about wellness all the time, we would never diminish that. It is our mission to bring people to the therapy and assistance that they need to get better. That there's a cost. There's a cost to dwelling. Or I got to say this appropriately because this is tough. We're walking on eggshells here. There is a cost to dwelling on one's problems.
Yes.
Okay.
If I can interject,
Yes.
In kind of a real life scenario that maybe people can understand, you get a call. You've got a violent act that happened inside a home. You've got somebody that is barricaded inside there that needs to be arrested. Now, we want to do this as safely as possible, and we take precautions. We'll talk about a plan before we go up to the house. We'll maybe bring up a shield. Maybe we'll elevate it to the level that we need to have SWAT there. But at some point, somebody has to get up there and knock on that door.
Mm-hmm.
I think wellness is something is that plan that we're putting forth. We've got that plan of, hey, if this goes bad, if you need some help, these are your resources.
Right.
However, somebody still has to staff those streets. We need safe communities, and not only safe communities, but we need men and women who are willing to be violent to keep our streets safe. And it's kind of the chicken or the egg theory. Which one do you need to have in place? Because if you don't have the wellness in place, we know what happens if we don't prepare for that. And we've seen generations of officers struggle with that and military struggle with that. But now I feel like the pendulum has kind of swung where we may be having too much of the cure.
It's dangerous. I think about those things my dad was referencing from pilots in particular in the late 80s. They were having a lot of collisions. They were having a lot of either air to air or air to ground type collisions, and they were losing guys in peacetime. And they studied it. The Marine Corps looked at it and said, what's going on? I mean, we're selecting the brightest, the most capable intellectually, the people that understand engineering and physics and math. But as you can imagine, the study also delved into some of the issues that they were having with the attributes that were missing. In the 70s, your typical pilot was, hair of the dog at 0-500 and smoked the last bit of that cigar and off to the first hop, right? And they were warriors. And as there became a genuine need to sort of elevate intellectually the quality of some of these guys, they may have lost something. And it may have been that warrior spirit a little bit. And as a result, and I'm not making I got to be careful here. I'm not making I don't want to talk poorly about Marines. I would never do that. But they were losing men in the sky. And they had to figure out what the problem was. And some of these guys were just sort of egg-headed intellectuals, but they didn't. There was a little bit of a failure to engage with some of them, and some of them did not survive. And it's very sad. And so they had to kind of recalibrate who they were looking for that person they wanted to turn into a fighter pilot. And so I can vividly recall those discussions, and I think that it has application here because we've all seen the ramifications of failure to engage on the street when an officer needs to knock on that door or needs to go hands-on right now, and the implication of that. And so we have to be careful as we push everybody towards, let's talk about our feelings. But we don't forget the mentality of rub some dirt on it and get to work.
And I think it's let's talk about our feelings for the purpose of getting back in the fight.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it needs to be, where that gap needs to be bridged, is that, if you're broken, you're broken, and let's get you fixed, whatever that takes, whether it's inpatient, whether it's whatever. Let's get you fixed and then back in the fight. And during the middle of a fight is not the time to go, excuse me, I need a timeout, And so part of wellness, and I think that's where this discussion and the clarification of wellness is in recognizing the signs so that your mind isn't quitting in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
You're recognizing those signs earlier on, and on the other side of wellness, you should be making better decisions. You should be making faster decisions. You should be. It's not a. After I went through therapy, I didn't feel like it was okay, now I just need to hug everybody.
Yeah.
You're violent, but I've been through therapy, so let's hug it out. Come on. I know there's a little somebody in there. Let's just bring them out. It's okay, I'm done. I'm on the better side of it. And so now I'm thinking more clear and more decisive, and I don't have that internal second guessing going. And if I need to use force, then I use force.
Right.
If I don't need to use force, then I can kind of see those other options a little more clearly. But what I worry about is that as agencies are trying to catch up to the wellness game, that they're affording opportunities for those without the warrior mindset to call their own audible and go,
sure.
Hey teacher, I just want a participation points. And it's going, we're in the middle of, I don't know that evil has been more prevalent than it is today.
Right.
And the stuff that we're seeing on the streets, the stuff that we're encountering, all those things, we can't have. This quote comes to mind. We can either have thinking, feeling men, or we can have fighting men and women. Mm-hmm. And I think I totally believe that you can teach one to do the other.
Yeah, we can have both.
But we're not.
We can have both if we make it an objective. I was in a gas station years ago. My dad had gotten sick. He had cancer, and that was a struggle. It was a shock to my family, and he had some surgery that he had to do, and long recovery. And anyway, I was in this gas station. I saw this card, and I thought of him. And you guys know, we've talked about my dad, mm-hmm. the colonel, the aviator, the Top Gun graduate. And it really touched my heart, this card. And I guess I'm too cheap. I didn't buy it and send it to him, but I at least wanted him to have the benefit of the sentiment that it shared as I considered his situation. And so I called him. I said, Dad, I'm looking at this card, and I thought of you, and I thought about what you're going through, and I wanted to read this to you. And the card says, and it shows a guy kind of laid up in a hospital bed, and it says, I'm sorry you're such a... Now, you can fill in the blank there, but I didn't even have the guts to mouth the words because of my new responsibilities at church. I can't say those things anymore.
Face is hiding behind the mic.
Exactly. Now he laughed, and laughed hysterically. And you might wonder, why would he laugh? Why would he? Because of where he comes from. When I was a kid, okay, we're going to go down that road because I'm really old. But when I was a kid, there were these people They were in their 60s at the time. And to a kid, people in their 60s they're a little bit invisible, because when you're a teenager, you don't really think about the elderly, right? And as I get closer to my 60s, that seems ridiculous that I would call that the elderly. I don't look at it that way now, but back then, anybody in their 60s, like, that's grandma, that's grandpa. But those were the people that fought the big war. Those were the people that stormed the beaches at Normandy and fought on Iwo Jima. And you look at those old films, and you look not just the films of them hitting the beaches and what they had to do in this fight for freedom against the axis of evil, but the fact that they all wanted to, the fact that they were clamoring to get there, the fact that there wasn't any real need other than a few posters to convince people where to go and how to sign up. They just did it. And it's why they call them the greatest generation. Those people were around us, those of us that are now in our 50s. They were our grandparents. They were everywhere. If you see one today, if you see one still living today, thank that person. There are a few of them still out there. They're in their 90s now. And that's who my folks came from. That's, and you think about what those warriors wanted for their families when they came home from the Pacific and from the European theaters. What did they want? They wanted to create a better life for their children. And that boomer generation was given, to a degree, a better life. And then they went to the Vietnam, and we learned some things about ourselves, about our country. And whether you were a conscientious objector, and frankly, we can have a discussion about that. I think there's some value in that to a degree. Or whether you were a military person or a volunteer who couldn't leave your brother alone in a foxhole, and there's great value in that. And I didn't want to get in the middle of the Vietnam controversy in this, but regardless, you knew what was required of you to be an American, and there is a requirement. I think there ought to be a requirement to be an American. I think that we should be pushing kids towards volunteerism. I think that there should be a discussion in our schools about the value of serving in our armed forces and serving as law enforcement officers. And I think that is missing. And one of the problems that we're having related to this discussion is that we're not always getting the best and brightest and most capable candidates for some of these roles, and we need them.
Well, and I think we kind of do that to ourselves a little bit.
Yeah.
I look at my own circumstance, and I successfully talked my son out of wanting to be a cop, and because coming out of it, when he was ready, he graduated high school and everything, and he's kind of gearing that way, and I'm still kind of freshly remembering, like the damage done and everything like
Sure.
that. And so in an effort to spare him from going through what I went through and what tens of thousands of others gone through, it's like, no, pick something else. And so
that wasn't a good time to ask you, should I be a cop?
Yeah,
that was a tough time.
And so now he's doing cybersecurity and loves what he does. But there's that moment where it's got to be where the sacrifice for the greater good comes in, and sometimes that's our own. You remember that story that you told about it was back in the Revolutionary War, and the guy that said, "I wish I had two sons." To
yeah, you're talking about the Her Majesty's vessel, the torture ship in New York Harbor.
Yeah.
And and I don't remember all the details of it, but essentially it was one of the signers of the Declaration, and he was asked to basically rescind his position as related to.
Or they were going to torture his son.
Well, and they were torturing his son. I mean, you could hear the screams of the people that were imprisoned on this torture vessel in the New York Harbor, and in consideration of everything that came to be in our nation because of the sacrifices that these men and women made, and his awareness of what it meant for the future of not just his family but for all of us, he flatly said no. And it's incredible when you think about those kinds of sacrifices. When you think about, I've been watching. I don't know when it came out. You guys watched that Steven Spielberg, The Pacific?
Yeah,
you've been watching that. Yeah, I've been looking at that for the second time lately, and it's just both of my grandfathers fought in the Pacific, and my dad's dad got a Bronze Star at Guadalcanal, and they reference they have scenes from Guadalcanal, and I can't. It's so overwhelming to me to just imagine facing what those guys faced. To be on that beach, let alone do anything other than curl up in the fetal position and wait to die. And yet they stormed the beach, and they got into that jungle, and they took care of business. And these were farmers and merchants' sons and mechanics and just people living normal lives as 18 or 20 somethings here in the safety of this country. But when the call came, they went by the hundreds of thousands voluntarily. Do we have those people still? Absolutely.
But going back to what you're saying, and I was going to bring this up, and I'm glad you segued into it. So one of my favorite, I love to study World War II. My grandfather fought in Patton's army in Europe, and as a tank driver, and I love the Band of Brothers series. And in the Band of Brothers series, they always start off with the soldiers that are talking that were still living, and they kind of have a living story with them before they start into the episode. And one of them was talking about the time, and how the time was when people were called up into the draft. He talked about his hometown. I think he said 4 men were declared 4F, and they committed suicide because they couldn't answer that call. And what an amazing sense of duty. But then on the flip side, they go and they fight, and General Patton, I know there's strong feelings about him one way or another, and my grandpa happened to be on the side that he loved him. Mm-hmm. When General Patton went and visited some wounded soldiers in the hospital, and he came across some guys that were not quite as wounded as what he figured they should be, staying in a hospital. He physically beat them and called them cowards and said, you shouldn't be allowed to be in here with men that have actually been heroes and have been injured. I don't think we need to be that far.
Yeah.
But if we can call back that sense of duty, not that we want people, killing themselves because they can't serve, but to have that sense of duty that drives you to go, and that drove these men and women to be into the service of our country, fighting. And I know with my own children, there's a big part of me that I don't want them to be in law enforcement, but I've made the decision I'm not going to discourage it. And I've got a 5-year-old son that he is just, he's kind of piss and vinegar, but he's also pretty sensitive sometimes, and he gets nervous, and he says, "Dad, I'm a little bit more brave if I can have one of those police stickers." And so I'll put a police sticker on his chest, and it gives him the bravery, I guess, to
There's
do
some
what he
truth to
needs to
that.
do that. And
There's some truth
there is, and
it's like Dumbo's magic feather. Like, I have a badge.
right.
Let's do this.
And there's a certain sense of responsibility, and there are many things that I don't want to do. I mean, this morning I was up at 4:30 watching a house, waiting for a guy to leave, and he left, and we got out in the rain and the cold to arrest him. And that's not necessarily what I envision being fun. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but getting up at the butt crack of dawn or before dawn, or working these graveyard shifts, or answering that domestic call. But getting back to our wellness thing, what I hope is that we get to a point that we live healthy lives to the point that we don't have the emergency that we have to go and visit the therapist for our wellness. I've always tried to maintain something for my weekends, some sort of hobby or something that I can decompress. And so thankfully, I mean, I've had several traumatic things happen to me in my career, like anybody else has, and I've been able to maintain that because on the weekends I'm able to do something else that causes me a different kind of stress, but it's not law enforcement.
And that's the thing about law enforcement, that it varies greatly from the analogy to these guys that were either volunteering or getting drafted into the military, is that nobody drafted us into becoming law enforcement officers. Everybody that is serving in this capacity did so because they wanted this type of career. And, I've had to counsel many dozens, I would say only dozens, it wasn't hundreds, but it was dozens over the years, on maybe they're not a good fit.
Yeah.
And maybe the things that our society is demanding of them as law enforcement officers is not something that they're capable of giving, and that they should be, they should usher themselves into more of a civilian role, and that's for their own good. And I'm not talking solely about people that have gotten in trouble. I'm not talking about people that have disciplinary issues per se. I'm talking about folks that are just struggling with, is this for me? And you have to answer that question for yourself, because it is a difficult, dangerous, thankless job at times, and you could get killed doing it. And that's a reality. But if you're going to stay, I'm just the final point on that. If you're going to stay, rub some dirt on it and get to work.
Well, I think that's the point. I mean, we all know and can think of people that, straight up anxiety about coming to work, and not necessarily because of something or because of somebody, but it's like their soul was calling them to do something different.
Yep.
But they didn't want to bail on the profession or those they work with. And that's okay. And we've got to make it okay to either, find yourself, figure out what it is that you want to do. Is it something that, this hiccup, is it something that you just need to, see somebody about, and then,
Sure.
Is that what's tripping you up, or are you destined to move in a different direction? And if it is moving in a different direction, it's figuring out where else you can serve. You can still have that serviceability. You can still have that warrior heart, and getting into something that is going to be meaningful to you. And on the flip side, I think we've got to do a better job as a profession about recruiting men and women into the profession that can do the job that is expected of them. Not on the, by one politician or another or anything like that, but what the profession needs.
Sure. And
Kevin, you just went through a process of selecting a dog.
Yeah.
And I would dare say that we make more of an investment into finding a dog than we do to finding the holder, the wearer of the badge that controls that dog. And how do we how do we test for drive with
It's tough
with recruits?
Yeah, it's difficult. You look at some of these youngsters that are coming in, and it's different even in the I've been around this a much shorter time than some of you in this room. But even in the time that I've been involved in law enforcement, it has changed immensely. And one of the last jobs that I had at my previous agency was background investigator, and see, it's almost the opposite of my day job. Day job is trying to help these guys and defend them, and background investigator is let's go find the dirt. And it a lot of times wasn't hard to find. There were issues, and it's a battle. It's a constant battle, especially when you started this episode by talking about the warriors also have to be thinkers. We have to have people that and historically, not to get totally off topic, but historically the greatest warriors were among the greatest philosophers and thinkers. And you look at the samurai tradition in Japan, and what those people were expected to know about academia and their culture. And I mean, they were extremely well educated. They weren't just guys that knew how to operate swords. They were historians, these guys. And some of the people that are seeking to be law enforcement officers are not doing it for the right reasons, and you have to weed those guys out, right? So it's a battle. There were hundreds of people that wanted every slot that came available when I went through. Now, it's sometimes tough to fill a class. And but I would rather there be the struggle to fill the class. I would rather there be, a requirement that they just muddle through and find the right people than to drop standards.
Yep.
And get people in there that are going to make a mess, because we've seen that as well. And I hope that I'm not coming across as being hard on folks. My kids sometimes think I'm, too hard. And it comes from the generation. I mean, this X generation that some of us in this room, other than the lone millennial over there, some of us in this room are a member of. We did do things differently. There was a different expectation at that time. I hate using the phrase "it was harder," but it freaking was. I mean, there were chores, man, and that effort to come back from the war and give the boomers a better life also began this cascade of trying to create an environment of comfort for our families, for the people around us. And that just got more and more robust as time went on. There's a YouTube or a TikTok or I don't know, short video that I love, and I've watched it 100 times, and it just cracks me up. And it's this like Judd Nelson looking guy. That's a reference to the Breakfast Club, for those of you that are old enough to remember. But so this guy with longer hair, and all he's doing is walking through a doorway. You can look this up if you have some spare time. All he's doing is he's walking through a doorway, and he's bumping into the door frame. But the first, and he's a great actor. And because what he's emulating is the difference between somebody born in 1970, 1980, 1990, and born in 2000, and the reaction of that person bumping into that door frame. I really hope that you look this up, but just as a quick description, born in 1970, you bump into the door frame, you don't even react, because deep down it's your freaking fault. You bumped into the door frame, and it means nothing. And there may have been some pain, but pain will pass. And that's born in 1970. 1980, which is one of my law partners, Nate Nelson, you bump into the door frame, and then you turn and swear at the door frame. Because something about those guys born in 80, they want to give you a piece of their mind. And they're gonna, right? And then Born in 1990, it's the look of, can you believe that door frame did that to me? Can you believe that?
I'm the victim.
Yeah, right. Well, but I love nothing more than Born in 2000, and that is the spiraling, out of control, falling to the ground, crying, and then pausing for the selfie.
So
and
here's
it's beautiful. It's he nailed it.
There's a video, and if we had the ability and time, I'd play it for you. But it's like it almost seems like it's not even taking the generation part out of it, you know, and maybe it's so you guys know who Alex Ovechkin is?
No.
He plays hockey for the Washington Capitals. He's Russian. He's probably, if he sticks around the league a few more years, he's going to break Wayne Gretzky's goal record. Phenomenal player. I hate it every time he plays us because he's just good. But it's his mentality in the game, and there's a video of him taking he's in the team box, and it's not his line's turn for a shift, so he's standing there, and a wayward puck comes and tags him right up under the visor. Ooh. And hits him right in the side of the nose. Now those pucks, I mean, you get a good slap shot, and you're coming 70 to 90, 95 miles an hour on that puck.
It'd kill you.
And this one, I'm guessing it was probably coming at about 50, 55 miles an hour, and it tags the visor first, skips off the visor, and then tags him in the face, and it drops, and he just kind of checks, you know, is it bleeding? Nope, no blood, and so he goes on. Then this video that I've got is one of LeBron James, and LeBron James, for whatever raw talent or things of that nature, and I hear people say all the time that, well, I mean, he married his high school sweetheart, he's a good dad, he's a good this, and I'm like, I don't care, because he is a raging, you're going to want to hit that button, he is a raging,
I missed it.
The button
oh,
away.
Geez.
Oh, great, now the moment when,
yeah.
Okay, a raging, there you go. So in this video, it's LeBron's dribbling through the middle of the key, and a guy from the New York Knicks goes to swat at it, and his hand, the butt of his hand hits the top of his head in a glancing one, not even a crushing down. So true to form, LeBron James, who, I mean, you look at him and you're like, he looks like he's tough, and he crouches down and he's grabbing his head, and he's over on the sidelines, and he's just wincing in pain, and he's looking around, and players are coming over to him, are you okay? And he's kind of walking back out to the free throw line, because they called a foul on the New York Knicks guy, and he's just looking at the ref like, can you believe this happened to me? And I'm like, you are a he. And yet this is the guy that's the role model. I mean, I don't care about that he's living a standard that, you know, 10 million other guys are living.
Sure.
You know, or that he's got some charitable contributions and stuff like that. Bottom line is that he's showing every kid that's looking up to him is that if you get touched, then you flop and you come off looking like that wuss. And how do those kids that look up to emulate him look?
Right.
I mean, why not have those role models that are showing that toughness?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it across the board. I've seen it with there was a soccer player that got hit by a paper airplane in the top of the head and collapsed.
Yeah.
And did the same rolling around. And then Barry Trotz, he was Nashville Predators' first coach, and then he coached the Washington Capitals, and now he's the Predators' general manager. He takes a puck to the head, and it splits his head open, and he just looks at it, wipes the blood, keeps going. I mean, if we're going to emulate people, if we're gonna have those heroes, let's make it some tough people. And where this segues back into wellness and how we prevent the we need the profession not to act like LeBron James.
You know, as you were talking, I was thinking about, you remember Street Survival School?
Yeah.
You know, I remember going to that, and there was a video they played about, I think she was a mother of 3 or 4, and she rolled up to a call, plain clothed, and investigating something, but gets inside of a garage, and there are a couple perps in there that immediately open fire. And here's this little lady, and she had just learned how to re-rack her firearm with the offhand. You know, she had gone through that training like the day before, and needed to, because they shot her so many times on that right side of her body that, you know, she unloads and has to do a full mag change with her offhand, you know, using her belt, and she does it, and she kills everybody in the room. And, you know, they interview her after this. And by the way, I should say that her male partner didn't enter that fight. I don't know what the story was there, but there was something off, it seemed like. And they didn't really cover that in the class other than to say it like I just said it. You can divine whatever that means. But she killed everyone in the room. And they interview her, and she said, I was outraged that they would try to take me away from my children. I was outraged. And she used rage to get her through that scenario. That's and awesome. Lived. And, you know, when you think about that, we talk commonly about it's not if but when. You know, when we talk about gunfights, it's when we talk about critical incidents, it's not if but when. Because if we don't have that mentality, then we're going to miss the opportunity to save ourselves. And that lady, that detective on that day, she did not miss the opportunity to save herself. She had it in her to get the job done, and it saved her, and possibly saved, you know, her partner who was around the corner, because who knows what these guys were going to do. We still have to have that in us. We just because we talk about wellness and go to your therapist and talk about your feelings, and all of that is critically important for your long-term success in the management of your mental health and your relationship with your families. You still have to have it in you to get the job done.
Rub some dirt in it.
Rub some dirt in it.
I really think that we can make even just some subtle shifts in what we do and how we react to things, and the things that we focus on in wellness, and we can keep it going to where we can have our cake and eat it too. I mean, we can make sure that our fighting force that's out there, that we're operating on all cylinders, mentally, physically, emotionally, and that warrior that can operate on all of those levels, that's a warrior that our communities need.
Amen.
So,
all right. Well, I think that about does it for that topic, and that was it was interesting. There were times where I found it difficult to talk about this stuff, but I'm glad that we did. And I hope you were listening. We care about you. That's why we have these discussions. We know that you're out there. We know what you're doing, and how important it is that you do what you do, and that you voluntarily, put that belt on and go get it done every day. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.